If you're feeling like you could use a little more magic in your life, you're not alone. Many people are seeking ways to connect with the mystical and spiritual aspects of life in order to find peace, joy, and fulfillment. In this episode, we'll explore some powerful ways to call more magic into your life. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Linda Lang.
Hi, this is Linda Lang from ThoughtChange.com. We are exploring the mystical side of life once again this week. If you enjoy our conversations, make sure you subscribe, hit the notifications, share it with a friend. Today, I have Zofia Renea Morales with me, and we are talking magic. Welcome, Zofia Renea.
Oh, thank you, Linda. I'm so happy to be here, and I love talking magic.
Magic is one of my favorite words, absolutely. But before we actually dive into it, why don't you define magic for our listeners?
Magic. I kind of have two kinds of magic that I think about when I think about magic. There's magic with a little m and a k at the end, which is what you will find when you go into the world of Wicca or covens or the more traditional worlds of magic. That magic is very much driven by your personal will here in this world. You obviously combine that with other factors to multiply that, but it's driven by your personal will. And then there is what I think of as magic with a big M, which is divine magic. And this is what is driven by divine will, your highest self, if you will, as opposed to your personality self here in this world. And that obviously gets combined and multiplied with other things to make miracles arrive in this world. And how I define a miracle is, well, I see two forms of miracle. Like I see two forms of magic. There is the feminine magic in this world, which is the magic of life and replicating yourself in seeds growing into plants that become flowers or fruit and make more seeds and replicate themselves in that kind of natural abundance sort of way that we have a tendency to take for granted. And then there is what I think of as the divine masculine miracle, which is the exception to the rule. We're not going to follow that particular guideline, and we're just going to bring this exceptional thing into the world, and then we'll go back to what's normal after that.
How fascinating that you look at magic and miracles in a masculine and feminine sense. I think that's very interesting.
Well, we are in a world of duality down here, and that's how we tend to define things. It's good or it's bad, it's male or it's female, it's low vibe, it's high vibe, we have all of these continuums that we like to divide into the two ends.
Absolutely. This is the world of duality, right? Absolutely. So when you talk about making magic happen, which level are you talking about? The big M or the little m?
I tend to focus on the big M magic in this world. I also have this, what I want to say, feeling, understanding, experience that this is not the first time we've been on this merry-go-round. And I've been shown some past lives. And I think the ones that we get shown are the ones that are applicable to, our current challenges in whatever is going on in this one. And I think part of my preference for the divine M magic as opposed to the little m personal magic has to do with some of those past lives where I chose to use my personal will in ways that were not supportive for other people necessarily. And so in this particular go round, I've chosen not to focus on that aspect. There's a lot of temptation down that path. And so I prefer to focus on the higher self kind of magic.
We go less astray when we have that connection, right?
Right. And we're holding the larger picture, the oneness aspect. I think it allows for better discernment.
And our soul has a plan as well that sometimes our conscious mind conflicts with.
Well, yeah, and sometimes we'll outright resist. I've trained scientist and worked in the financial industry for many years, and so I came into this world from a mindset of 2 + 2 = 4. It's got to be replicatable. I've got to understand the mechanism of action in order to really be able to make this claim. And my soul had a whole different plan.
I love it because that's magic.
It is magic. And I think one of the things that I will share, because I don't think it gets acknowledged enough, there tends to be this feeling that, well, once you're aligned with your higher self, you're on your path of purpose, miracles are moving into your life, all this kind of stuff, that it's like unicorns and rainbows, and the world suddenly just conforms to every whim and desire that you have. And while there are days that are that way, life continues to be life. And if you think about what it takes to change, and the butterfly is kind of like the ultimate example of dramatic change, right? One day it's this little inchworm going out along the branch, and it has this compulsion to like eat everything it can get its hands on. I mean, it's like the ultimate emotional eater, right? Stuffs itself full of all these leaves and stuff, and then it hangs upside down and it vomits all over itself until it's got this chrysalis formed. And then it gets melted down. It's not like the parts rearrange. It literally goes back to molecules and undefined cells, becomes this goop, and then puts itself back together into this strange, amazing new shape. And when it comes out of the chrysalis, it bears no resemblance whatsoever to what went into it. And it's delightful to see that transformation. But when you're going through that transformation, it's intense. I've been there. I've been in the chrysalis, and it is really intense. And you start to wonder if you're losing your mind. You expect they're going to send the guys in white coats in any second with wraparound sleeves. And it can take a moment or two to begin to feel quote unquote normal. You never quite feel what I want to say like yourself, because that was a very different self that you were operating previously. But there is normality eventually that arrives, and you begin to find your balance, and your wings dry out, and you can start to use them and do these amazing things that you were previously unable to even imagine were possibilities in this reality.
I think it's really interesting because having gone through my own shift, obviously, I'd probably describe that I'm more myself now than back then. That old Linda, definitely
Exactly.
like a different life, really.
Yeah, and a whole different person in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I don't necessarily want to scare people because, the journey is so worth it.
It is so worth it. And even the discomfort that you go through is so worth it. It's one of the interesting ironies of this particular world, in this particular dimension, that all of the good stuff is on the other side of fear and pain and discomfort. It just is.
Interesting thought.
And we all have free will. We can choose to lean in and go there, gather up our courage and our bravery and our curiosity and step into it and see where it goes. Or we can choose to not.
So, how can we make magic happen in our lives?
One of the things that I have observed, and I think curiosity is our friend in this, is you will only receive the amount of magic that you can accept.
I totally agree.
When I was going on my healing journey, as I mentioned, I'm very scientific, humanistic, 2 + 2 = 4 kind of person. I, on a personality level, invited this in. I was in this moment of extreme duress. I was not between a rock and a hard place. I was between all the rocks and all the hard places, and literally saw no way out. And it was in that moment that I decided to surrender, I guess, to the divine, to my higher self. Because the mental me, the personality me, had no answers and had accepted that completely and deeply. And I basically told God, for lack of a better term, you can use whatever you want, universe, spirit, source, I will do anything to resolve this situation. It was a health crisis. I was going to die. That's all there was to it. I was going to die. And all of the answers were out of reach. And I immediately got a response, which kind of surprised me, because you hear about people all the time. I pray and pray and pray, and I don't get an answer. I think a lot of times we pray and pray and pray and then ignore the answers because we don't like them.
They're not what we want to hear.
They're not what I expect for an answer. And it's a perfectly human thing to do. I did it myself, I think, for decades. But in that moment, it was like 3 a.m. It was completely silent, other than my own thoughts. And I heard a little voice in the back of my mind, which was probably talked to me over the preceding decades, but I hadn't paid it any mind. And the little voice said, "Really? Anything?" And I thought about, what are the implications of that word, anything, right? Here goes the scientist again, right? Well, let's see, what are my edges? And I won't harm somebody else. I'm not going to rob or cheat or lie or steal or do that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that's off the table for me. Okay. I thought about what I knew in the depths of myself about God, as distinct from what I was raised with, which was, fire and brimstone and God telling people to go conquer cities and wipe out. Yeah. And I don't really think that's God. It's one of my issues that I have with religion. So I thought about what my understanding of God was. And God is love. God only wants the best for us. God wants us to be able to choose the experiences that we have here and to choose something different in any moment if that's what we decide we want to do. And so I said, okay, God, for you, I will do anything. And I got my first blessing because I fell asleep. It was my first mini miracle. And there were a series of steps of mini miracles that took care of my health situation. But it was not one of these big dramatic, whoa, you're healed kind of moments. I think primarily because I could not accept that. But 2 weeks later, I was given an example of what can happen when you can accept something big. Because I was coming home from the grocery store. And I will preface this by saying a bunch of weird shit had started happening in my experience. This was the scientific word for what was going on. I was hearing voices. I was seeing angels and crossed over dead people. I was seeing future things. I was seeing past things. I was getting the answers to the questions I asked in my mind. Like, you see somebody do something weird at Walmart, and I don't know about you, I'm a people watcher. I will think to myself, I wonder what happened in their life that is the logical decision to make. And I was getting the answer to those questions. And so the scientist in me has been writing all of this stuff off. You've got more brain damage than you realize. You just have this really creative imagination. There's no way you can verify or validate any of this. You must have heard it in the past, because I said a prayer in Hebrew. I've never learned Hebrew before. It just kind of popped out of me. And I looked it up, and it's like this candle lighting ceremony. And so the scientist in me has been very busy trying to write off all of this stuff. And this particular day I arrived home, and I'd been to the grocery store. I've got ice cream in the back of the car. And I see my neighbor helping her husband into the house. and she's staggering under his weight. He's bent over in what's obviously a great deal of pain. So to heck with the ice cream, and I help her get him in the house, and she's explaining she's got to go make an appointment with the kidney doctor. It's gotten so bad, and she's really worried for him. And I'm like, do what you need to do. I will stand here with him. There's nothing you can do to make him comfortable, because kidney pain is kidney pain. It's going to be what it is, whether you stand or sit or whatever. So we stood in the living room, and I'm holding his hands to provide what comfort I can. And I can see his eyes have closed and his lips are moving, and I know them to be very devout people. They've been in service with God for decades and have a very close personal relationship, and the finest kind of religious people that I know. And my most recent conversation with God was 2 weeks ago, and before that it had been decades. So I wasn't very comfortable watching this, so I decided to close my eyes to give him some privacy. And when I closed my eyes, I saw this little tiny flame in my mind's eye. It looked like a little pilot light on the edge of going out. You know how they kind of dance and pop and flicker right before they go. And I was told or informed, knew, I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't a mind thought. It was a divine thought that this is where he's at with his life force. He is on the edge of going and leaving this life. I haven't acknowledged who I'm talking to or any of that, but I asked in my mind, is there something we can do about that? Now, why I would even think that thought shows that the scientist wasn't completely in charge. Because the scientist would have told you there is nothing that can be done here. Kidney disease is an ongoing downhill slide. There's no reversing it. You know, all of the traditional stuff that the medical world understands about kidney disease. But there was another part of me that asked that question. And the instant I asked that question, is there something we can do about that? That little tiny pilot light burst into this great big flame, bonfire kind of situation. And I didn't have any time to appreciate it because he dropped my hands and he looked at me and he says, "Are you a healer?" And I'm looking around to see who he could possibly be talking to, because that is not me. That is not entered my world. And I was saved from having to answer by his wife coming in and sharing that they have the appointment. They need to go right now. Okay, great. So I helped them get out into the car and I hid in my house for 2 days while the scientist proceeded to convince me that nothing happened. It was complete just serendipity that he would ask that question at that moment. It had nothing to do with anything. And I'm a terrible neighbor because she's probably at the ICU or planning his funeral in this moment. And I haven't checked in to see if I can bring her chicken soup. And so I finally guilted myself next door. And I went next door and I tapped. And she answered the door. Okay, so she's not at the ICU. She's not at the funeral home. Let's see what's going on. And then she smiled really big. I'm like, okay. So she's not planning a funeral and he's probably not in the ICU. And she says, "Come on in. Jay has so many questions for you." And my stomach dropped.
Questions you couldn't answer.
I have no answers. But I'm committed at this point, so I'm going in. And there he is. He's in the living room. He's kicked back in his Barcalounger. He's got his remote and his book and his drink by his elbow, looking fat and happy. Like, okay, so he's feeling all right. And I asked him, "How you doing?" He says, "It was the weirdest thing. By the time I got to the doctor's office, I was feeling pretty good. And they ran me through all the battery of tests they normally run me through. And would you know, my kidney function came back normal." Now, this man hasn't had normal kidney function in decades.
Just like that, right?
Just like that. In the length of time it took for him to drive to the doctor's office, which was probably 20 minutes. And that is the difference between someone who can accept a big miracle versus someone who can only accept smaller miracles. Mine came in a series of more mundane, more defined steps that my mind could more easily accept.
Sophia Renee, we have something in common because my path started, although I always had an interest in metaphysical stuff, it became hardcore with a health challenge that could, maybe some people would say should have, but certainly could have taken my life. Absolutely. So it just opens up a totally different world when you're in that place of surrender. And yet there must be a way that we can open to that without having to hit rock bottom, drama, trauma, life pain.
Wouldn't that be nice? And I think there are people who do, who take the earlier invitations, because looking back on my path, there were earlier invitations into understanding and exploring that there is more than just this mundane physical 2 + 2 = world. And looking back, I could have taken any one of those other invitations, and I chose not to. And that's free will. That's a personality level thing. And at some point, I think when you're bloody minded that way, your soul at some point goes, look, it's time. And there are a few ways that you can get the time to really think and reflect and begin to shift some of those highly entrenched personality patterns. And unfortunately, they tend to involve accidents and illness, because that's your hall pass in this society, to sit for a great length of time and have other people care for you and take care of those mundane sort of physical needs while you really sit with who you are and what you're about and what your life has meant to this point and what it's going to mean going forward.
The mind can be it can be a dangerous thing because it's meant to be a tool, but when we turn it back onto ourselves, it can create some pretty rigid mental structures.
Absolutely. The difference is between the mind being a tool and the mind being, it was almost my religion, if that makes sense. That's not a good role for the mind. The mind is a tool. It's a servant. It's here in service of something much larger than that.
What advice can we give our listeners to find a gentler way to open up that door a little bit to attract more magic from their soul?
One of my favorite ways to, sidestep the rigidity of the mind and the mind pattern. If you're like me, mine has been very well trained, right? I've been through a lot of schooling, I've done a lot of studying, I've done a lot of personal development work, which can lead you down the path to your soul, but it can also lead you more into your mind. It's all in how you choose to use it, right? And the thing that works for me the best to get me out of that, my mind knows what it wants, it knows what the expectation is supposed to be, is to step into curiosity. Just to release the idea that I know what the outcome ought to be and get curious about what the outcome actually will be.
Or what else is possible.
Or what else is possible, exactly. Because I would say, looking back on the worries that I've had in this life, the plans that I've had in this life, all of that kind of stuff, and what my mind expected ought to be the outcome. My mind is right about that maybe 0.5% of the time. 99.9995% of what I'm worrying about will have no reality in this world. So it makes it a little easier for me to kind of release those awfulizing cycles. It's like, yeah, no, that's all kinds of speculation. Curiosity is the big thing for me. What is possible? The other thing that I have found that is a key that I think is perhaps not acknowledged enough in the realm of magic, whether it's with a big M or a small m. Magic with a small m tends to focus on your focused intent. I command, I will forth this outcome, and that works beautifully. Magic with a big M responds to questions. And your questions make all the difference in the world. And magic with a big M will answer every single one of those questions for you. And so you have a free will and a choice, whether you want to ask, why does this always happen to me? Is that a question you really want answered? Or would you rather ask something more like, how does this serve me? What I would invite the listeners into is pay attention to the questions that you're asking, because they will be answered. And if you don't like the answers you're getting, you might want to think about what some other possibilities would be for questions.
You know, for myself, there was one particular time when I was going through a difficult situation, and I put the question out to the universe, how can I bring love into this? And it changed instantaneously. I mean, it was night and day. It was like just this thought I put out. I didn't even intend to put it out to the universe. It just, I had it in my head, like
your higher self put it there for you, I'd suggest.
Exactly. And it was really magical how it shifted the circumstances. So I'm a great believer that put the question out without attachment to even having an answer, right? It's just like you're giving the universe, God, source, your higher self, an opportunity.
Exactly. So it's an invitation into your life in a particular way. In your case, you are looking to introduce more love.
Or less pain.
Less doesn't work. It's like no and not, those words you need to just release.
If you were to ask, how can I have less pain? Pain is the focus.
Exactly.
Our words are so powerful.
And there are many beautiful alternatives. I remember when I was early in my health journey, I'd been reading a book on neurolinguistic programming, which is, what I want to say, the more scientifically dressed aspect of speaking what you want into this world and manifestation. And I remember I was in so much pain and I was miserable all the time and I was not sleeping. I had no energy. It was just this list of like heavy, dense, I don't feel good stuff. And it's like, you speak what you want. Well, I don't want to feel, and I had that whole list. It was hard for me to even remember what is on the flip side of that. How do I even frame that positively? And it was a struggle for me. I got there eventually, but it took weeks of like really working with it. And it's like, how do I want to feel? I want to feel rested. I want to feel invigorated. I want to feel energetic. I want to feel light and free. And I want to feel vibrantly healthy, radiantly healthy. But it was a long reach from where I was at to get there. I spent a lot of time like listening to other people who were feeling better than I was to kind of hear how they were describing themselves in their world in order to start to get there. So if you're in one of those places where it's like, I can't even imagine what the opposite of this is. We're in a world of duality. Go observe some people who are in the place you'd rather be and see how they're describing it and how they seem to be experiencing the world, because it'll help to jumpstart your own thought process, because we do kind of get into these mental ruts.
Yes, we have minds that love to dissect our situations that we'd like to change, but that only creates more energy for that situation.
There are ways you can lift yourself out, have someone else help lift yourself out of that path so you can start creating some pathways that support you better. Curiosity, openness, observing people that you would like to share more of those traits are helpful ways to start that process.
Open-ended questions, right?
Open-ended questions. How can this get better? How can this be any better than it is?
Sophia, Renee, it's been fantastic having you as a guest today. Time to wrap up. Is there any last tidbit of information you would like to share today?
I would like to share that whether you feel you're magical or whether you feel you're a muggle, there is magic within you. It may not be what you believe magic is or ought to look like. So I would invite you to get curious about the form that your personal magic takes. Ask the universe, how am I magical? Show me my magic.
Beautiful. If people would like to learn more about your work, how can they reach you?
My website is transformationspace.co. One of these people who likes to get to know people a little bit more gradually, I would invite you to take the superpower quiz. I have a quiz. It's the What is Your Number One Spiritual Superpower? And so it will allow you to get to know yourself and your own magic a little bit better. And it will also put you on my mailing list where you can get to know the Zofia world a little bit. You can get to that quiz by going to superpowerquiz.us.
Well, thank you again for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
And thank you for listening to this week's edition of Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. You will find all of our conversations on Apple Podcasts, here on YouTube. Remember to come visit me at thoughtchange.com, pick up your copy of Learning to Listen, and while you're there, check out my group, Alchemy from the Inside Out. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.